springtime, a time for renewal of life, a time for celebration around the world. For the Jewish people, springtime has a special significance. It is the time of Pesach, the Passover. When Jews think of Pesach, they think of the warmth and the joy of the Passover service and meal called Seder. The mother and children light the candles while singing a traditional song. The father recites the following: "Let all who are hungry enter and eat with us. Let all who are forlorn come and celebrate Passover with us. Let our friends and neighbors of all faiths feel welcome." And then he welcomes me to their Seder. The father says the Kiddush, the blessing over the wine. Because of its association with the home, the Pesach Seder exercises a very strong appeal among Jewish families. For this observance, they gather from near and far, young and older generations. The Seder begins with the questions of the youngest child, its core. The answers by the parents. The youngest child asks, "Why is this night different from all other nights?" The father answers. "What is the meaning of Pesach?" I ask. Pesach, the lamb's shank bone, recalls the marks on the Israelites' homes which the angel of death passed over. The roasted egg symbolizes the bursting out of the shell of slavery into a new life. Moror is the bitter herbs, and it's a reminder of the bitter hardships of Egyptian bondage. The green herb symbolizes spring and its promise of perpetual renewal. What is the matzah? Another question by a guest. The 3 pieces of matzah reminds us of the hasty flight to freedom. The charosis, a mixture of grated apples, chopped nuts, cinnamon, and wine, resembles the mortar used by the slaves to build Pharaoh's cities. The meal is then eaten. A large goblet for the prophet Elijah is on the table, and at a dramatic moment, the door of the house is thrown open in the hope that this year Elijah will return and proclaim a time of universal freedom and peace for all mankind. The afikomen, a Greek word meaning dessert, is half of the middle matzah. Earlier in the Seder, it is hidden as a special fun part of the evening. The children hunt for it and trade it for a prize. Then everyone at the Seder table shares pieces of this treasure, thus ending the meal. In each country, freedom has a different meaning, and in each land, the Jewish people are free to express what freedom means to them as part of their traditional Seder. For freedom is as much a spiritual concept as it is a political one. For American Jews, the words of a popular patriotic song have special significance. Our fathers, God, to thee, author of liberty, to thee we sing. Long may our land be bright with freedom's holy light. Protect us by thy might, great God, our King. This is Loretta Bacon, reporting for Composite.
A former member of the Alabama legislature, former mayor of a small Alabama town, Secretary of the Senate, and now author. McDowell Lee, who occupies these confines in the state Senate when the legislature is in session and maintains this office year-round, is a native of Barber County. Lee held his first political office at the age of 21 when he was elected mayor of Clio. He was elected 3 times to the House of Representatives. For the past 15 years, he has served as Secretary to the Alabama Senate. He is the 28th person to hold that office. As Secretary of the Senate, McDowell Lee is responsible for the processing of legislation on the Senate floor and seeing that it gets to the House of Representatives. He is advisor to the Lieutenant Governor and members of the Senate on constitutional, legislative, and parliamentary matters. In this year, 1978, McDowell Lee has authored the book, The Role of the Senate in Alabama History.
Well, George, when I became Secretary of the Senate in 1963, I looked around for some information on the legislature, on the Senate, and I found that there was none. So I began to gather information over the years of past Senates and what caused them to act like they did, and how they fit in with the constitutions and so forth. And a couple of years ago, I discussed this with Senator Dick Owen and got him to introduce a resolution in the Senate asking me to write a definitive history of the Senate, which he did, and the Senate adopted. And I subsequently contacted a former history professor of mine out at AUM, Dr. H.E. Sturks, and he brought his colleague, Dr. Ben Williams, in, and the three of us sat down and worked up an outline of the material that I had, and we began originally to write a history of the Senate. But as we got into it, we found out we couldn't write a history of the Senate. We had to correlate it with administrations and with times and with the Constitution and its relation, and then the Senate's relationship with the House and with the different administrations. So therefore we called the book The Role of the Senate in Alabama History, and that's how we came up with what we got.
In the early 1960s, the legislature was faced with reapportionment brought on by the inequities in representation in the legislature, affecting Jefferson County and Lowndes County quite a bit. How do you deal with this in the book?
Well, we show that, for instance, Jefferson County had well over 500,000 people in the county, and they had one senator. Lowndes County and Mouth County of Barber, with 20-odd thousand people, had a full-time senator. And people in the larger counties instituted a court case in the federal court on inequities in reapportionment. And in the early 60s, Judge Frank Johnson ruled that reapportionment must take place. And the 1960-61 legislature passed a reapportionment bill. And the only way it could pass, they put a provision in that it would take effect 4 years later, not in 62, but in 1966. Well, Judge Johnson ruled in July of 1962 that the reapportionment plan would take effect immediately, not 4 years later. So 1962 election was the first that we had any semblance of real reapportionment. And then after the 1970 election, the legislature tried to reapportion itself again, but because of selfishness by different groups, they were unable to do so, and consequently, Judge Johnson had a master come in from out of state that devised a plan, and that's the one that we're working under now.
In the center of the book, it has a variety of pictures. There's one picture of a state senator from Barber County who also served as lieutenant governor. Any particular significance of this individual?
Well, since I was the author of the book, that gentleman you referred to, Charles Samuel McDowell Jr., was my mother's oldest brother, and I thought that it would be nice to have some family connection printed in the book. He served in the Senate under, he served as lieutenant governor under Governor Brandon, and he had previously served in the Senate. And then after he ran for governor, and Governor Bibb Graves beat him. That was back when they had first and second choice votes, and Governor Graves got more second choice votes and was elected governor, but my uncle came back and served several terms in the Senate after that.
Would you recommend the book, The Role of the Senate in Alabama History, as a textbook to be used?
I don't think I'd recommend it necessarily to be a textbook. I think it would be invaluable as a research book or a reference book for them, because, like I say, this is the only, to my knowledge, work on the legislature itself. And when you're studying the history of Alabama, I think that it's imperative that you know something about the legislative process, and this does deal with one of the two branches of the legislature, which is one of the three branches of government now. And the laws that the people live under was created right here in this building by the Senate and the House, and I think it would be a very good, invaluable reference book.
Thank you very much, Mac.
It was a pleasure, George.
For Composite, I'm George Mitchell.
down there first.
Are we ready? You beat me.
Throw it down there.
The State Civil Defense Director, C.J. Sullivan, today inspected the storm-damaged areas with officials from the Federal Disaster Assistance Administration. Estimated damage has been placed at $850,000 in Monroe County and $157,000 in Montgomery County. Sullivan said Governor George Wallace has asked for federal major disaster assistance.
Governor Wallace is requesting disaster assistance from our federal government through FDAA, and we're trying real hard to secure some individual family grants and some temporary housing for our people. Basic needs are still some help for the people. We have a lot of people that are homeless down there, and from our best estimate, we have about 30 families that need a temporary house to live in. And we have about 25 families that could use one of our individual family grants that's provided under the Federal Disaster Assistance Administration. Now, in Montgomery County, we found pretty well the same thing. We found a lot of trees down and a lot of homes damaged. And we have a need for about 6 temporary houses in Montgomery County and about 17 individual family loans.
I will assemble every fact I can find that have been supported and supplied by us local government and state government in an assessment of this situation and provide that to our national office in Washington. That will be then transmitted through the Secretary of the Department of Housing and Urban Development to the President with a recommendation, and I am not at liberty and have no idea what that recommendation would be, and it would be inappropriate to assume a position of one or the other.
George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
I saw you on the Carson show last night. We appreciate the plug.
Well, thank you.
Was the flight anything like you described last night?
It was better than that. Better. It really was.
It was great. Super.
The flight.
The flight, yeah. Oh, wait.
Off to Montgomery, Alabama.
And there's a lot of other celebrities coming off this plane. You better interview them.
First time in Montgomery.
Well, welcome here. You looking forward to the tournament?
Fantastic, I'm looking forward. Like, I haven't been looking forward to something in a long time because George is a close friend of mine. Nice to see you, too.
You've been playing a lot of golf?
About once every tournament. That's about it.
You have a lot of fans back at the station that watch you from 12:30 to 1:30, and they want me to ask you one question. Yes. I want to ask you one question. Are you going to drop out of the Senate race?
I lose.
You lose?
I lose.
No, you
I really shouldn't have said that.
Really?
The controversy involves 3 sections of housing on the old Craig property. This is the specific issue
but only a part of the overall question of who should take over the entire base facilities. Mayor Joe Smitherman says the property should revert back to the city. The government says it will sell the housing to the Craig Industrial Group.
In 1950, we gave the War Department, Craig Air Force Base, 2,251 acres of land for $1 with a reverter clause in the case it ceased to train Air Force pilots, it would revert back to the city. Now, they've built housing, buildings, and et cetera on it. Now, they've got two groups of housing out there. They've closed it down, took away a $40 million economic factor. We understand their reasons why. We have settled for that. And Selma's surviving, we're doing well. They are supposed to help us economically readjust by putting industry at Craig Air Force Base. Now, you've got two groups of housing out there. You've got 300 units that's called K-Part that was built 10 years ago at $4 million. They want us to pay them $2,576,000 for it. They're not another group of housing, which is 216 units that cost $1,800,000 in 1951, and they want $1,080,000 for it, when in every other base they gave it back to the community. We're getting tired of what they're trying to do is make low-income housing out of it. Now, I'm for low-income housing. I've got a record of that. You can go throughout Selma, and low-income people need housing, but the housing at Craig is needed to attract industry. We need that housing for the employees, for new industry. We'll try to get out there to live in those houses. They're trying to put the price so high that we can't pay it, and then we shouldn't have to pay anything to start with, and then they will make low-income housing out of it, which would be an adverse effect for the economic readjustment of Craig, and we're not going to stand for it.
What do you plan to do, legally and otherwise, as far as the property is concerned?
Well, we plan to talk to Senator Allen and Congressman Flowers and ask them to use, you know, their influence in this situation with GSA, and if they can't, then we'll take action on our own over here.
Which would be what?
Well, I'm not going to tell you at this time, but we gave them the base for $1, and the base is ours. They've given it back every place else. They don't mind giving away stuff in Vietnam and leaving equipment or giving the Panama Canal back, but here they're trying to sell back the city for about $5 million, something that already is ours.
The government has given the city a May 2nd deadline to come up with the money for the housing, but the mayor doesn't seem to be too concerned about it.
Well, we're not going to pay any attention to that.
This is Dave Rickey, WSFA TV News, Selma.
Today, Bobby Doctor, Regional Director of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, said his agency will ask the Justice Department to amend a massive job discrimination suit now only pertaining to blacks to include women. The announcement came today during the Commission's viewing of a documentary film on employment patterns of blacks and women in Alabama.
Men, white and black, are in stereotypically female jobs.
There's no glamour in being a secretary. I'll say being a stenographer, being a clerk, and statistics will show that that's mainly what we are.
Commission spokesperson Miriam Grayboff says research here in Alabama showed that women are still given traditional and low-paying job positions.
8 categories which EEOC asks for reporting in. We found that these 8 categories are kind of vague. You would assume that the top category has the top salary and the bottom the bottom. We found out that office and clerical and paraprofessional are way down there on the bottom, along with service and maintenance. Also, there are overlapping pay scales, so that you might get officials and administrators in a pay range from $8,000 through $25,000 and above. And in office and clerical, you'd get some at $6,000 to $12,000. So you see, there is this lapping. In fact, we may recommend later on that a different kind of classification technique or system be used instead of giving these things titles, which women have been paid for in a long time. It sounds very fancy to be a paraprofessional, but that is one of the lowest pay jobs. So that if the federal reporting techniques would take into account more specifically salary than title, I think it would give us a better picture, and the state itself would know how people break down. What we did was take all the computer printout and then compress it into that chart that you saw on the film.
No date was given for the amendment of the suit, but commission members were told today that only one black state employee is employed in a position that pays up to and over $20,000. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
The drastic action taken by Selma Mayor Joe Smitherman may be the first of many protests over the conditions of railroads across the country. The mayor says that his blockade was prompted by 3 derailments within a 4-day period of time in Selma. This trend is becoming more apparent in many communities. In 1967, there were approximately 5,000 derailments in the United States. In 1977, the Federal Railroad Administration reports more than 8,000. Kay Bailey, acting chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board, says one reason for the increase in derailment is due to the fact that there are larger locomotives and cars and longer trains. She says this is good from an energy-saving standpoint, but says the rails were not built for these heavier trains and are beginning to cause problems. Mrs. Bailey says the first problem to be tackled is improving the rail beds and then upgrading maintenance and the standards for the rails. Another suggestion to prevent tragedies like Youngstown, Florida, and Waverly, Tennessee, is to add shields on the ends of tank cars to protect against puncture, and better couplers between cars need to be developed. Sometimes the connectors between the tank cars can act like rams bursting through the tank cars. The financially strapped railroads are aware of their problems, and with protests like this week's blockade in Selma, the public is becoming aware of them too. This is Bob Howell, WSFA TV News.
Security was extremely tight for the hearing, which lasted more than 5.5 hours. Judge Newman Sankey ordered Berard bound over to the grand jury, then set bond at $100,000 for each of the 2 murders. Judge Sankey extensively questioned each of the witnesses, who included the state toxicologist, the chief of homicide, Lieutenant Don Terry, and 2 of Berard's friends, one of whom was his former girlfriend. After the hearing, defense attorney John Capel said he would immediately file a motion asking for psychiatric testing for Berard. And also, Capel said, due to the amount of publicity in the case, a change of venue motion would likely be filed after the grand jury hearing, which should come up sometime in June. This is Dave Rickey, WSFA TV News, reporting from the Municipal Court.
Well, we considered it, but, you know, they might fire you quicker at Auburn for not having a day than anything else. No, we'll have, it won't be a game as such. It'll be a control-type scrimmage, and we plan to go offense against defense and find some scoring system whereby the defense can score and do it that way probably. We'll have some competition, we hope, and at least if somebody gets hurt, which we hope not, we can switch around there and it won't be a big problem. We did this past Saturday, and it turned out fairly well. And we need to play a game, our young people do, but this is the way we're going to have to do it with our limited number of people.
I asked specific questions about the various functions at Maxwell and how the proposed change would affect them. And the Secretary himself wrote the letter in response to that, and he says that in relation to our university, our intent at this stage is to maintain its organizational integrity essentially as it presently exists. The Air Force has no current plans to significantly reduce, disestablish, or relocate any of our university's assigned or tenant units, or to inactivate Maxwell or Gunter. Specifically, there are no current plans to move either the ROTC, the CAP headquarters, to disestablish the Senior NCO Academy, or to transfer the Extension Course Institute or any of its functions to another base. On the contrary, we intend to relocate the Community College of the Air Force from Lackland Air Force Base, Texas, to Maxwell as soon as possible. And he goes on to emphasize that they would try to balance the workload here if there should be any changes later. So I was very pleased with the response. I think it's good news. The only reason it wouldn't be good news is if they are trying to be vague and misleading, and I think it's a forthright and a forward response to my questions, and I was very pleased with it.
Are you satisfied now to let the reorganization go through as planned?
Yes, I've been in communication with the mayor this morning. He was very pleased with the letter, and so we've decided that we will drop the lawsuit to enjoin it and rely on the goodwill of the Air Force and the statements of the Secretary that no real serious harm is going to befall Maxwell or our community.
The author of the Pulitzer Prize-winning novel Roots is in Alabama to aid Sister Cities International in its fundraising efforts. Tuskegee, Alabama is the sister city of Banjul, Gambia, where Haley traced a portion of his roots. Several Gambian citizens accompanied the Haley entourage to meet with the governor. Haley told Governor Wallace of his childhood in the South, including Alabama, where Haley attended college. He said one of the things which impressed him most about the present-day South is its strong commitment to the family.
It seems that during the 1950s, the 1960s, was a period when the ghetto was kind of romanticized almost for black people, and ignored largely were those of us who had Southern rearings. And somehow there is a great difference in those rearings. The big thing about the South being that those of us who were brought up here, having nothing to do with color, tend to have been brought up in an atmosphere of respect for good people. The influence of religion is very high, and communities which were kind of interacting. And those influences seem to have reflected themselves very much in people who have broken through and succeeded in one thing or another.
Governor Wallace agreed with Haley that racial conditions have improved greatly in the South and that they are continuing to improve. Besides proclaiming today as Alex Haley Day, the governor also commissioned Haley as a lieutenant colonel in the governor's militia. Haley will return to Los Angeles tomorrow to continue preparations for a sequel to the television adaptation of Roots. This is Dave Rickey, WSFA TV News, reporting.
On the eve of Respect the Law Week, as proclaimed by Montgomery Mayor Emery Fulmer, attention today was focused on law enforcement personnel who have or are involved in stemming crime. A posthumous award was made to Staff Sergeant Thomas Campbell of Maxwell Air Force Base, who was killed recently investigating a crime. Campbell's commanding officer accepted the award for the late sergeant's wife. Tech Sergeant George Hill received the annual Optimus Club Law Enforcement Award, which recognizes contribution to the profession. Sergeant Coy Smith of the Montgomery Police Department, who interested the Optimus Club in setting up the secret witness crime telephone system, received a plaque.
I certainly appreciate this, and I'm not one for making speeches, but all I would like to say is we would encourage you to talk about the secret witness program, and that's the only way it can be a success, is for people to know what the number is and what it's for. So when you go back to your communities and your homes, let's promote it, because it is a worthwhile undertaking, and I certainly appreciate you all and the part that you've played in it. Thank you very much.
The system was instrumental in solving a double murder at Skate Haven a few weeks ago. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.